Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. We don't have many things to talk about. Maybe width isn't big, but depth is certainly there. We'll start with the balloon from hell. Um, do you agree, before we get into the particulars, if it was a B movie back like in 1985 or something, it would be panned as completely ridiculous?
Yeah,
The
the
senile
idea.
president asleep at the switch. A balloon is traveling all around the country, taking pictures and capturing sensitive information. And the president, with his aviator glasses, is having a pistachio ice
Yeah, the
cream. Siskel and
idea
Ebert would
that
trash it.
the idea that we would let a spy balloon just go across our entire country and not do anything about it until after it leaves land, then we shoot it down. Now, I mean, this is 2023. So, first of all, yeah, I mean, the idea that we're being cowed by a balloon is ridiculous. But second of all, yeah, we shot it down after it went across the country.
After it completed its
Are
mission.
right? Are we supposed to believe this wasn't transmitting? I mean, this isn't like 1960 when they need to recover the spy balloon to get the and retrieve the information. We have radio waves. This could was transmitting the whole time.
No question about it, but it also goes into the bullshitter and liar in chief. If that photographer just didn't have a high powered lens and good photographic equipment, they would have never mentioned it. Which leads me to believe two things. What other bullshit are we not being told? And second of all, this is not exactly the Army, Air Force, Navy, whatever, armed forces that I grew up with as a kid that, beyond reproach. A balloon, really? And their way I was like, this has happened before. Happened before? You mean this? You let this happen before?
Yeah,
It's a balloon. It's not
this
a
was
satellite. What are you kidding me? We, I mean, are we really safe in this country if a friggin' balloon can transit the United States? Uh, and I believe this is true. Someone else said this. If Biden was coherent, he should have fired everyone involved.
yeah, I find it amazing that his excuse is, well, the generals said we shouldn't shoot it down. The generals also told you that your Afghanistan evacuation was going to be a massive debacle. That you didn't listen to. But now they don't want to shoot something down. Oh, well, I'll defer to the generals. And this,
That was a no. Do you agree or not that that was a bullshit excuse?
oh,
That he
absolutely.
did not authorize it. And who's in charge?
That's
he's
it.
the commander
He
in
is the
chief.
commander
What do
in
you?
chief.
No, I don't think we should respond with a missile attack. Okay,
And,
it's like ridiculous. He no,
and
again. This is because some obviously a partisan podcast, but every day that goes on, do you agree that he just becomes a caricature of himself, and
he
no one can take him seriously?
He really does. I mean, his excuse was they didn't want to shoot it down over land because the debris field could have hurt people. Meanwhile, you've got the governor of Montana saying this was over our state, telling the president to shoot it down over his state because they've got wide areas where you won't hit
The
anybody.
chances of hitting something, even a cow, is the chance of me running a 4 minute mile. It's
They,
wide, and the Aleutians are
yeah,
even more. There's no one there. How does that sound? So what does infuriate me, it is comical, but the the lack of regard for the American intelligence. I mean, how dumb do you think we are to buy this bunch of bullshit?
the
You
other thing,
couldn't shoot,
yeah,
but it's better to shoot it down. The same chance of hitting something in the water is the same thing as Montana or the Aleutian. You could hit a cruise ship. Really? I mean, or a boat? What? It's a ridiculous argument.
I mean, the other thing that is truly troubling is one, this is not the first spy balloon to go over the US during the Biden administration. And two, his first thought was not, well, we didn't handle it well. It's, oh, well, there were three spy balloons that went over the US during the Trump administration, but nobody knew about it. And he said, the spy balloons have gone over us in previous administrations. Well, the Trump administration, the Obama administration, the Bush administration, and the Clinton administration all issued statements going, no, this never happened on our watch.
But isn't it his modus operandi? Is you just blame others? I mean, there's no way. Okay, no, and he's so dumb. I'm sorry to say, he's so dumb that his rebuttals are just infantile. Like you actually think that no one's going to check it out. That yeah, it happened under Trump and it happened. No, it didn't.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's bizarre.
he's a pathological liar. And we know this because he lies again, the Washington Post gave him 5 perpetual Pinocchios because he tells so many lies. Last night it was hysterical. I saw reports during the State of the Union address, fact checkers' heads were exploding over the number of lies he told. It is absolutely amazing that he is incapable of telling the truth. And most of what he lies about is inconsequential. It's
Oh,
about jobs that he had or things that, places he went that he never did.
he's the George Costanza of presidents. I mean, if you we remember the show, George never had to lie. Okay, it was everything was he created his own craziness. You know what I
Yes,
mean? Like dating, he could have showed up on the date and said, "I'm doing this," but he had to invent like he's an astronaut or whatever.
right.
Same with Biden. I was a professor. No, you weren't. I was
Yes.
top of my class.
Maybe
No,
maybe
you
that
weren't.
may,
Four
maybe
degrees. No.
maybe that's what we need to refer to him as, President Costanza.
Oh, you know, it's absolutely true. And no one takes him seriously. I'd love your comment on this. Over the summer, he called Saudi Arabia. No answer. They just hung up on him. He called China. They basically played back to him the voicemail. I mean, I mean, Obama didn't have huge cred around the world, but not. This is a new level.
This
I
now
mean, and
this
there's no repercussions. You could laugh at the guy right to his face. No one's going to do anything.
No, we're making fun of that, but we really shouldn't because this is actually dangerous. Right now, Saudi Arabia has an American prisoner that the Biden administration has been trying to get released. And Saudi Arabia just announced they're extending his prison sentence by 3 years. So this is a serious problem. We have Americans abroad who are suffering because he has no credibility on the international stage.
Okay, but speaking of the credibility issue, why is the press? It's not as bad as it was. Idiot, and I say idiot intentionally, like Chris Wallace saying covering for this idiot, okay, saying it was a masterful political performance. First of all, his ratings. Does he have what the paper boy, the people that does washes his driveway, and maybe the telephone repair person
Well, I
are
mean,
his audience?
let's face facts. Chris Wallace doesn't have a lot of credibility. This is the man that jumped ship at Fox News for a job at CNN Plus. Not even CNN. He went right to the streaming service. So his judgment isn't the best. You've got him, you've got Joy Reid, you've got Don Lennon, you've got the idiots of The View. They are political hacks. They don't care about facts. All they want is to push their agenda. And I mean, Don Lennon was amazing because there was a an interview done on the CNN morning show. Lennon didn't do the interview. And it was actually a pretty good interview where they were talking about what the oversight committee was going to do in investigating why Twitter had blocked the New York Post over the Hunter Biden story. And they do this interview. The interview ends. They cut back to Don Lennon, and he goes off on a rant saying, well, how dare you call the New York Post a credible source? Excuse me, the information in the New York Post has now been verified by virtually every media outlet on the
Got a lot
planet.
more
They
credibility than CNN. Jesus.
and it's certainly a lot more than Don Lennon. So it's they don't care about the facts. They're pushing their agenda. And you can see the result in the ratings because people are saying, you know what? You can only lie to me for so much. I would like for what you're saying to be true, but it isn't. And they're turning off in droves.
Do you think they did an effective job potentially in covering for dumbass for the State of the Union, or was it don't blame? I mean, trust your lying eyes. I mean, like, how could have anyone saw that who has an IQ above like 90 and think that was a presidential performance?
Yeah, I don't think they covered for him well at all. I think they tried, but I have seen comments from Democrats who are just appalled at his performance last night and even more appalled that it looks like this was the kickoff for his 2024 campaign. Democrats overall, I think it was 60% at the last poll,
It is
don't
60,
want
over
him to
60. Yep.
run again.
Well, I think to me, yes, I'm not a big fan of his, but it looked really unpresidential. And with that in mind, let's address the State of the Union address. Um, in my opinion, the most dysfunctional. Do you agree, Dr. Lopkin, or not?
It was absolutely dysfunctional. And I think it's important to point out that the reason it was dysfunctional falls squarely on Joe Biden. Because just prior to the speech, the cameras actually caught Kevin McCarthy and Kamala Harris talking, laughing, being very congenial to each other. They actually showed an image of unity, and then Biden got up there and completely blew it.
Absolutely, and that's what his target was. And it's really interesting that you say that because Ben Shapiro on his podcast basically summarized the event as a angry, dysfunctional person just getting angry, yelling,
Yeah, I mean,
just losing it.
you don't call for unity and then accuse the opposing side, in this case the Republicans, of wanting to cut back Medicare and Social Security when fact checkers for months have said this is a lie. The Washington Post gave that four Pinocchios when he first said it. And not only did he say it again in the State of the Union, but when the Republicans actually shouted him down saying it was a lie, he backtracked, but he started, no, no, some of you are, some of you are. It's like, yeah, you know where this came from? Tim Scott had made a comment
Yes,
about it
who
that
I'm not a big fan of, but anyway.
that that not a single Republican signed onto. It was shot down by the Republicans immediately. And yet they keep pushing this big lie.
But
To be fair, this is a lie that's been around longer than Biden. The Obama administration told this lie.
it's comical and also concerning that his one mission, it was like you're on the 1 inch line, your one mission is to run the ball with Bronco Jenkins, the 350-pound running back, and you punt. I mean, it's like you just had one thing to do.
Yeah,
Preach unity, convey unity. That's it, nothing else. And you blew it.
and
Like they said,
I
he could screw up anything, Obama said.
well, and he did screw up. I mean, he started the speech talking about Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader. Apparently, he believes the Republicans won the 2022 elections.
He also did that with the an ambassador, prime minister, whatever it was, ambassador of Ukraine, and he was introducing her, and he screwed up the name and just bailed and said, "Stand up, let's see you." I mean,
Yeah,
oh
it's
God.
it's absolutely ridiculous. And to be fair, Trump had this problem too. You have the speech on a teleprompter. Stick to the speech. Read what your speech is. It's been written by people smarter than you.
Well, that bar. I mean, with Biden,
I
you're
know
talking
that's a
about a
low bar.
sixth grade civics class. Do you again? We did say this, but it's one kind of final takeaway on it. Was it the most dysfunctional State of the Union you've seen by a president performance?
His performance was the most dysfunctional. I think overall there were actual signs of hope. For instance, I'm sure our listeners will remember during one of Trump's State of the Unions, Pelosi stood up and actually ripped up the speech. McCarthy showed Biden respect, and as Republicans were shouting him down, McCarthy on several occasions told them to shush and be respectful. So you saw McCarthy calling for unity, calling for it to be a bipartisan effort, and Biden instead going off the rails.
I think that's where when he lost it. To be honest with you, when he ad libbed or reacted, because let's face it, as Shapiro said, he's an angry old man who's got dementia. Uh, when he went off on the entitlements and the Republicans' plans to sunset, even though it's something that he actually pushed back in the 70s, but when he started getting angry, that's when I think the balloon was shot down. That's
Yeah,
when it lost.
I think the problem is, or was, that Biden is used to telling lies, but he's not used to being called on it.
Yes.
And to lie about what the Republicans are planning in front of the Republicans was absolutely ridiculous. And of course, he was also lying about his own accomplishments. He stated that his administration created a record 12 million new jobs. And this is a quote: more jobs created in 2 years than any president has ever created in 4 years. But if you actually look up the number on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the government agency that tracks this and actually gives the administration the data, his administration only added 2.7 million jobs, not 12 million.
Well, doesn't it always go to his feeling of inadequacy that he's got to make up with his grandiosity? I mean, professor of UPenn, 4 degrees. I mean, he's been doing that before he even came, before he suffered from dementia. He was that way.
Yeah, I mean he's been making up stories for 50 years.
Yes, he has, and now it's gone to a new level. And he did have a response when the Republicans were heckling him, and he meant to say, "I enjoy. Don't worry, I enjoy conversation." He said, "Yes, I enjoy conversion." Maybe he was talking about transgender or
Yeah,
something. But
I
just
don't. Yeah,
another
I
example.
don't know what he was talking about. I don't think he knew what he was talking about.
And speaking of the old man, angry old man, overall conversation, I think at another point when he really lost it, out of for no reason. That's why it gets comical. If there was a reason or it's in the script and it's fake outrage, I get it. But when he was talking about the Chinese leadership and just went on this rant screaming, "Name me one world leader that would take the place of of their inner
Yeah,
circle." And yeah, I think the leader of Bangladesh probably would.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a number of them.
I think the
He
line's
was
pretty long, actually.
he was trying to get across the idea that he was being tough on China. And he hasn't been tough on China at all in his administration, and quite frankly, he wasn't tough on China before he was president
But what does that have to do?
because
Explain to me, please, because I'm a little. I don't understand what that even meant. Name one leader that would take. How does that even support any? What is that? What does it mean?
I think he was trying to make the impression that he has been so tough on
Oh, okay.
China that nobody would want to be in that position. And of course, again, everybody knows China is laughing at us. They were laughing about the balloon.
Well, they don't return his
There's
call. They don't take. They're
yeah,
not really. They have no respect for the guy. And again, he never referred to the border, but he did call for amnesty. I mean, talk about being tone deaf,
yeah, he mentioned briefly how many people are being killed by fentanyl. But
which
of
he's
course,
partly
he,
responsible for.
yes, but he made no mention of the fact that it's pouring across the border because his border policies have completely failed. He did not mention the fact that this fentanyl is being manufactured by China and being sent over our border by Mexican cartels. And he also, of course, failed to notice that even though China, I'm sure, wanted to do this before Biden's presidency, and immigrants wanted to come across before the Biden presidency. Trump's immigration policies had slowed this down to a crawl. It was nowhere near as bad. And the first thing he did was get rid of all of Trump's policies and open the floodgates. So
And
again,
to encourage illegal immigration, not just to say, be neutral on it. No, to basically promise goodies, amnesty, you name it. I don't know. With him, you never know if it was intentional or just by his own stupidity or negligence or incompetency. But whatever the reason, it happened.
yeah, I don't know why it happened. I find it absolutely hysterical though. There's pundits on both sides of the aisle have said that the whole reasoning behind this is because these immigrants are going to vote Democrat. Except the Democratic Party keeps getting pulled further and further to socialism. These folks are fleeing socialist countries. They're not going to vote for a socialist government.
Plus, they're very entrepreneurial. The last thing they need is government screwing things up. So, yeah, and speaking of this, Karl Rove was talking about this on one show. Basically, there's a real problem with the mass exodus from the Democratic Party across the board.
Oh, yes, voters are leaving the party.
It's a whack
We
job
saw
and down and out party.
we saw it with the Hispanic community. We're now seeing it with the African American community. The African American community is absolutely furious because they essentially saved Biden's campaign. And now they're saying, well, but what have you done for us? Absolutely nothing.
No, absolutely nothing. And I don't know if you knew this, Dr. Lopkin, but during the address, Biden was talking about the energy situation, so that we needed, which got a laugh. We do, I don't know if you knew this. We needed oil for at least probably a good 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I was amazed to actually hear him admit that. But of
But ten
course,
years, I mean, I think
yeah,
it maybe a
well,
little longer than that. 10
yeah, I
years.
mean, we need it for more than 10 years. The green economy is not going to be ready for prime time in 2033, no
No.
matter what Gavin Newsom and AOC want you to believe. But
And little Petey,
he,
Mayor Petey,
yes, he says we're going to need it for at least 10 years, but he has gone out of his way to make it harder and harder for American oil companies to drill and produce that energy. And it is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, speaking of ridiculous, oh, actually, speaking of more concerning, four chief justices or
For
justices
yeah,
did not show up. Your
yeah,
thoughts on that?
four Supreme
Never
Court.
happened before.
No, it's never happened. Four Supreme Court justices did not show up. Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Sonia Sotomayor, and Neil Gorsuch all decided to pass on the State of the Union. It's never happened before. Now, if all four justices had been conservative justices, I might have said, well, they didn't want to hear his lies. But by no stretch of the imagination can you label Sonia Sotomayor as a conservative justice. So, what was going through their heads? And honestly, the only thing I can come up with is the fact that Biden has been absolutely disrespectful of the Supreme Court, calling them a political arm, which they're not, and he absolutely refused, and his Justice Department refused to provide security when people were threatening their lives. And I think the Supreme Court justices are now saying, you know what? We are not your political patsies. Enough is enough. And
Agreed
I,
100%. But um, doesn't it also have implication in terms of Biden's at least mindset in terms of packing the court or being receptive to changing the institution? I think that had something to do with it as well.
oh, absolutely. I mean, they were talking about over and over packing the court so they could get more, liberal judges on. And none of the Supreme Court judges, even the liberal judges, thought that packing the court was a good idea. Now, of
And
course,
but
that's
doesn't the whole
completely off
thing
the table.
get into really, Dr. Lopkin, excuse me, the whole bigger overarching 10,000 pound elephant, whatever, in the room is lack of respect. He is the clown. He's the chief clown, the clown in chief.
Yeah, nobody has any real respect for him. They pay lip service. They're all saying, oh, yes, we're going to support him if he runs again. Most Democrats in Washington are terrified that he's going to run again. And not just because they're pretty sure he's going to lose. And and by the way, he thinks he's running against Trump again. I hate to be the bearer of bad news to Sleepy Joe, but he's not going up against Trump. Trump is not going to win the Republican primary. And if you needed more evidence, the Koch brothers announced that their massive campaign network will not be working for Trump. They have pledged to stop Trump from getting the nomination. Now, this is basically like George Soros telling a liberal, I am going to fight against you. So
Well,
he's
didn't the
not.
Koch brothers though? Weren't they against him in the last election? Is this maybe nothing there?
I don't think it's. I don't know if they supported him in 2020. They did support him in 2016. And that right there could tell you something because, again, he won in 2016 when they were backing him. In 2020, when maybe they didn't, he didn't do so well.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with you, Dr. Lopkin, on that. But and you're right on with that in terms of funding and other technical and financial issues. But I also think it's Trump fatigue. I think we talked about this before on Carnivore Bites. As soon he's a house of cards. As soon as
oh,
there's
yes.
someone that comes to the front and wins the straw poll, wins something, or gets some momentum, check please.
Right, but going back to Biden's lack of respect, he thinks he's running against Trump, which was the point of all of this. That he's not. He's going to face a new opponent. But Democrats not only don't they think Joe could beat anybody other than Trump, They're also terrified of the possibility that he is incapacitated during his presidency and Kamala goes to the Oval Office.
Oh
They
God.
don't want to see that either. And you're seeing more and more Democrats, while they won't come out against her, as liberal media is asking them if they believe Kamala should be on the ticket, they are dodging the question.
Well, you
No,
have Pocahontas basically dissing her. You had Hillary diss her last week.
you've had a lot more than just the two of them. There have been interview after interview after interview. They're trying not to diss her because, and I love when they come up with lines like, well, Biden should be able to choose whoever he wants. If he wants Kamala, then we support Kamala. And they're just putting it on Biden. But they're terrified that Kamala could end up in the Oval Office because they got sold a bill of goods. When she was running for president, the left convinced them that she was a viable candidate. And now, every time she opens her mouth, she proves she isn't.
I agree, and usually vice president's kind of a look at Dan Quayle, kind of a minor issue, even though he didn't actually help
Oh my God.
Bush. But no, with his age coupled with her incompetency, it's a huge issue.
And that's something else that you brought up Dan Quayle. I have heard this over and over again, and it makes me laugh every time. The new description of Kamala Harris seems to be, boy, she makes Dan Quayle look like a Rhodes Scholar.
Oh, no question
That,
about it. I don't know if she could spell potato, but who knows? Um, Closing on this, they see all his cabinet, his advisors, and our whole legislative, both senators, congressmen, and I help me with this one, Dr. Lopkin. I couldn't help but think, and I never really had these feelings, let's say 10 years ago, that the whole lot of them, Republicans, Democrats, the inside Beltway people, a ship of fools that you couldn't have had a better group of idiots and greedy SOBs that have led America since the 1950s, post World War II, when we were on top of the world, to where we are now in, let's say, 70 years. You could not have designed it better. And on both parties, we are being led by a ship of fools that our adversaries, like China, are just, they probably are just spellbound at how this could happen to once, how this country committed self suicide.
yeah, I'm actually going to go a little further. In the late 80s, early 90s, when I was in college and we went into Iraq for Operation Desert Storm, there were rumors going around that they were going to reinstate the draft. And we were going to war, and I was in the prime age group to be drafted. Okay. I was not as scared for the country then, at that moment, when I thought there was a possibility that I could be sent to war, as I am right now. We have had two spy balloons go over the U.S. during the Biden administration. Another spy balloon was spotted just last week over Latin America. We have Iranian warships headed to the Panama Canal. We have North Korea shooting ICBMs and getting them further and further. We have Russia gearing up for more attacks in Ukraine. We have Iran meeting with Russia because they are going to build a plant in Russia to build Iranian
And
drones.
by the way, uh, thank you, Barack Obama, for allowing the Iranians to have that technology when they hacked our drone and he did nothing about it, and they just reversed engineered it. Hello, thank you,
Yes,
Barack. A real great president. Yeah, amazing. But yeah, no, I agree. But it does go into used to be this great deliberative body. You had a couple of outliners, some idiots here and there, but the whole lot of them, Chuck Schumer, and then AOC, and on both sides, Green on the Republican. These people are 100% incompetent. They could not run a ice cream stand.
No, it is absolutely amazing. And I don't remember who it was, but somebody just brought this up about AOC. She has a degree in economics and couldn't even do that in the private sector. She was a bartender. These are folks that could not survive in the private sector.
Like I
So
said,
they
I wouldn't
went,
let them change
yeah,
my oil.
so they went into politics and they have driven this country down. And yes, this is not a partisan
No.
issue. This is on both sides. We have had dumber and dumber people entering public service claiming, oh, it's a noble calling. No, it's not a noble calling. Quite frankly, these folks have made more money thanks to public service than they ever could have made
Well,
in the
look at
private
Biden.
sector.
I mean, you only made
Biden,
you less
Pelosi.
than 200 grand. You went from which liberals, media even back then used to poke fun at, but you went from Eisenhower in 1952, head of the Allied invasion force, to Biden. I think there's a little bit of a drop off there.
Oh, yes, there is. And I think it actually started with the Clinton administration because prior to that, I mean, George Bush Senior, the media used to go off, oh, he's a wimp.
He
They
was
used
no
to
wimp.
denigrate him.
Highly
He was head
qualified.
of the CIA.
Plus a
This
fighter
is a
pilot
man
at
that,
18 years old. You go try doing
right,
that sometime.
exactly. And we don't have people with that experience
He was the last
anymore.
of the Mohegans. No question.
Yes,
That's a great point. Then you had Bill Clinton, just a womanizing non inhaler, and then it went right down the shitter. George W., an IQ of like 70, got us into that 20-year-old bullshit, unwinnable conflicts. And now you've ended with the creme de creme, the apex of incompetency, the aviator himself.
yeah, it's been absolutely ridiculous. And we've seen that the Democrats don't have a bench. So whether or not Biden runs, we are not getting a credible Democratic
There's no
candidate
way.
in 2024. I'm hoping that the Republicans can come up with a credible
Oh, I
candidate.
think they have
And
a very good
quite
bench.
frankly,
I think they have a good bench.
Haley has proven as both
Pompeo's
governor
good.
and as ambassador. Pompeo, I'm not as sold on, but Haley has shown that she could do the job. She's did a great job
Do
as
you
both
think she could
governor
win
and
head
as
to head against
ambassador.
Trump? Do you think she could go head to head and win against Trump? I do.
I think she could because Trump has made many very positive comments about her. So if he suddenly does goes negative on her, they don't those comments lack credibility. But other than her, DeSantis has shown leadership that he can come forward and step forward. Abbott in Texas has shown great leadership at the border where the Biden administration completely fell apart there. So I'm hoping that some very good candidates come up, but there was an article, and this actually does concern me, about the Republican candidates. I think it was in the Atlantic, and they pointed out that at this point in other presidencies, at the time of the second State of the Union, the opposing party had already been announcing candidates. And the only candidates that have even, I mean, technically, Haley hasn't announced yet. She's announcing on the 15th. The only candidate that has officially announced is Trump. And they brought up the point, do the Republican candidates actually want the job? Because we have created between the two parties such a shit show that whoever wins, Republican or Democrat, is going to inherit a garbage dump, a dumpster fire.
You're 100% correct. It's like being in business. Your predecessor ran the product line, set everything up, didn't exactly officially run it into the ground, but it was all the underpinnings were there, and you get handed the job. You're like, holy shit.
Exactly. So
Well,
there is
Doctor,
that question
good.
of whether the highly qualified candidates want to put themselves in that position. And to be fair, that could be one of the reasons that the Democrats have such a weak bench, because there are Democrats out there of quality and they don't want to be a part of this mess.
I think that's a problem, an overall problem for our political structure and our country overall, because you have the morons at the helm. Well, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites. We've been on a roll lately, Dr. Lockman. I think we've had some really great shows, including I think, what was it, our second show of the year, third show on policing and with that guest, and
Yes,
a lot of good issues.
there's been a lot for us to cover, and we've been hitting it head on. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lockman. We'll do it again next week.
We'll see you then.